Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Fadil, and inshallah this will be the first sort of reflective episode of the channel. So today's sort of video will be about death, and it's quite timely because of the recent passing of the esteemed Sheikh, rahimahullah, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who recently passed away, and the passing of the Queen, which, you know, affected many different people across the world. You know, I saw a statistic which said over 5 billion people watched the funeral of the Queen, which is over 60% of the world's population, just to put it into context. In terms of my own experience, unfortunately, during the last week, I saw one of the patients I was taking care of pass away. So it was out of hours. And when you're out of hours as a doctor, you're covering maybe, you know, on that shift, I was covering about 80 different patients. So you only cover certain emergencies and certain jobs that were handed over from the day team for you to get done in the evening. And I get called, you know, towards the beginning of my shift to go see an urgent case to help with the sort of management of a patient. Nothing, you know, it was nothing sort of life-threatening, but it was still an urgent sort of matter. And then after that, I was called to go and assess a patient who was vomiting blood. So as I was getting ready to go and see that patient, bear in mind this is, you know, still within sort of the first hour of the out of hour shift, and I'm running low on sleep. This is probably the worst sleep I've had throughout the sort of my first 2 months of working, and so I'm shattered and the timing of it couldn't be worse. But I was called, and then the ward alarm goes off, and I rush to the bay, and I see a patient you know, having a really significant nosebleed. And during medical school, I had an ENT placement, which means ear, nose and throat specialty. And you see lots of different nosebleeds, but this was by far the worst I've ever seen. It was almost like a burst pipe, just so much blood. And the senior nurse looks at me and says, call the registrar, which is a senior doctor. And a nurse has never opened by saying that to me. So instantly, especially a senior nurse, who was the nurse in charge that day. So I knew straight away how serious this was. So I call the sort of senior doctor we had on the ward at the time, who was 2 years senior to me, and then I call the reg. So the sort of doctor on the ward, he's helping me. He's trying to get access to into the veins so we can get fluids, you can possibly get blood in, so we can try to save the patient's life. I'm calling the reg, and I'm ordering blood tests, I'm prescribing fluids, trying to get things sorted. And the reg comes very quickly. She comes within 10 minutes, and she goes, assesses the patient, and comes back and says, she's gone. And it was I've only ever seen one patient die before that, you know, and she'd already been dead for like an hour when we went to go see her. And it wasn't one of my patients. I was on a night shift, and the doctor who was with, the senior doctor, wonderful gentleman, learned a lot from him. And he was like, oh, do you want to, you know, go confirm this death with me so you can learn? Because, you know, I've read about it, but I've never actually confirmed the death. So it was a really sort of good experience for me in terms of the learning aspect. But going and seeing the patient dead was just such a shocking experience, just a lifeless patient. And then in this case, when I'm trying to save, or I'm part of the team, you know, trying to save the patient's life, and then, you know, she was just gone. And, you know, everything kind of just stopped, and I put my head in my hands, and I just didn't want to say anything. And then, you know, tears started coming out. And it's, you know, it's incredibly emasculating, because I've never cried in public in front of other people, never mind in front of colleagues. But the feeling of just sort of sadness and disappointment, and almost feeling like, you know, you've let the patient and their family down. And to put it in context, this patient was, you know, an elderly lady. She had lots of different health problems going on. The family were not expecting her to stay alive for too long. But even with that, it still felt so surreal, because get called to see her, and within 10 minutes, she's just dead. And I had to take a bit of a break off the ward. And I was praying Maghrib. It was time for Maghrib. was thinking of the ayat in Surah Al-Nazi'at. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والنازعات غرقا والناشطات نشطا. So here two different pullings of the soul are described. When you pass away, the angel of death pulls your soul out. And the first ayah, when nazi'ati arqa, describes the sort of painful process of the wicked or the disbelieving soul being pulled out. And the second ayah, when nashitati nashta, describes the sort of pleasant experience of the righteous believer who have their soul pulled out. And I was just thinking, that lady's soul right now is being pulled out. And, you know, of course, I don't know what her religious beliefs are, and she wasn't my patient. I don't know this lady, but it was more than likely that she was not Muslim. So that was a very sort of, I'm there praying my salah and I'm thinking this lady's soul is being pulled out right now by the angel of death. And towards the end of Surah Al-Nazi'at, well actually right at the end of Surah Al-Nazi'at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها. On that day, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you'll look back at your life and it will be like a morning or an evening. Or an evening or a morning, so yeah, عشية أو ضحاها. And on that day I was on a 12-hour shift. And morning and evening, it's a few hours. And I just thought to myself, less than a third of my shift is what my entire life is going to feel like on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day which can feel as long as 50,000 years, or as long as, you know, a matter of hours, depending on how righteous you are. And the sort of crying aspect was, you know, I've always felt that, I don't know how accurate this is, and this could be wrong, that, you know, the only context where I feel like it's okay to cry is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, that's it. That's one of the 7 means of attaining the shade of Allah's throne in Yawm al-Qiyamah. But crying in front of people, especially crying in front of colleagues, it's definitely not something that I've ever wanted to do. And it was a very sort of, the whole experience of it was just very surreal. It was like something, seeing her in that state with all, you know, her bleeding was very severe, and there was medical students there. It was their first week of their first placement, and they saw that. And that was, you know, my first 2 months when I saw that. And the senior nurse afterwards told me the next day, we had a chat together, a lovely lady. She said to me, you know, I've been working for 10 years and that's the first time I've seen something like that. And I was thinking, wow, I've just started and I've had to deal with that. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. But I think if there was one thing that I could take away from this experience is that just how fragile and how frail we are and how weak we are. You know, within 10 minutes that lady passed away. You know, if I was to drive and I was to be involved in a car accident, la qadar Allah, I could pass away just like that. You know, there's people who are refugees in war-torn countries, their life can pass away just like that. The only thing we can take with it is our deeds. So may Allah make it easy for us to keep our sort of intention and our hearts firm on the deen. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك آمين برحمتك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.